Hello and welcome to the Daily Climate Show. Coming up, climate activists say they will continue to step up protests after Just Stop Oil disrupts the Snooker World Championships in Sheffield. The lorry industry says plans to decarbonize the sector are decades behind passenger cars. And we meet India's mangrove man, who's single-handedly trying to help combat rising coastal waters. Hello and welcome to the Daily Climate Show, where we track the changes to our world and investigate some of the potential solutions to the climate crisis. Climate activists have told Sky News they intend to continue to disrupt sporting events after two protesters disrupted the World Snooker Championships in Sheffield last night. Just Stop Oil are demanding that the government end all new approvals for oil and gas exploration. Now, our climate change and energy correspondent, Hannah Thomas-Peter, is looking at the story today. She joins me now from Parliament Square in central London. Hannah, what can you tell us about this one?
Well, this, of course, follows the disruption of the World Snooker Championships late last night, in which two activists, a man and a woman, targeted with, to a pretty dramatic effect those important games. One of them threw orange powder and the game had to be stopped. Another attempted to glue herself to the table. Both were arrested. And, of course, on Saturday, there was the disruption by another group, Animal Rising, of the Grand National at Aintree. And over 100 people were arrested in that situation. And these are examples of splinter groups, well-organised, smaller groups, deciding to cause maximum disruption. Will the government do what they're asking to stop the expansion of new oil and gas sites in the North Sea? That's in Just Stop Oil's case. It's very unlikely. The government's, in fact, in the middle of an expansion of oil and gas drilling. It says that we need fossil fuels in the decades to come, however unpopular that might be. But I did talk to a Just Stop Oil spokesman about the logic behind these kinds of protests and the public backlash. And he revealed, really, that the disruption and causing anger is the point.
The disruption will continue until the government make a meaningful statement to halt any new licensing or consents for any fossil fuel exploration in the UK. And we would encourage everyone who understands how important this is to join us on a slow march from 24th of April in London.
So, Hannah, that big event planned for this weekend, what do you know about it?
Well, it's Earth Week, it's Earth Day on the 22nd. As such, Extinction Rebellion and a number of other groups are joining together. That includes Greenpeace and Friends of the Earth and even the PCS Civil Service Union, to take part in a series of events from Friday to Monday. And they're saying at least 30,000 people have already signed up. They're expecting many more. They're calling it one of the biggest climate protests the UK has ever seen. And the idea is to mass around Parliament, not necessarily to disrupt things, not necessarily to glue themselves to things or get arrested. Those are some of the tactics we've seen before from Extinction Rebellion in particular, but really to apply mass pressure to the government to do two things: to stop the extraction of new oil and gas from the North Sea, but also to create emergency civil assemblies to give citizens a fairer say, they say, in tackling climate change. Again, very unlikely the government's going to do what is asked of it. It is, of course, pursuing an expansion of renewable and clean energy, and it is saying that it can still decarbonise the power sector, still get to net zero by 2050, but in the meantime, it says, fossil fuels in diminishing amounts are a critical part of the transition.
OK, Hannah, thank you. And to let you know, Tom Heap will actually be presenting a special programme on the age of climate activism this weekend. That's on Saturday and Sunday at 3 p.m. and 7:30 p.m. Right, well, let's have a look at what else is making the headlines today. And the European Parliament has approved sweeping reforms to the bloc's climate policies in a vote earlier today. The plans include an ambitious upgrade to the EU's carbon market, which forces polluters to pay for permits based on the amount of carbon they emit. The European Commission says it will lead to a 62% drop in emissions by 2030 when compared to levels of 2005. The CEO of the rail company involved in a fiery train crash in Ohio in February will testify in front of the state Senate today. The train was carrying hazardous material when it came off the rails in the village of East Palestine. Half of the town's residents were evacuated and have complained of ongoing health problems following that crash. Now, Ohio has since passed stricter rail regulations, but it is unclear if they can actually enforce them, given that they are superseded by federal law. And Hampton Court Flower Show is set to showcase a series of desert gardens for the first time. That's in response to the changing climate. Last year, there were such high temperatures during the show that many flowers wilted or bloomed too early. RHS says with extremes in the climate becoming more common in the UK, gardeners are looking to plant more resilient species. The road haulage industry is warning that efforts to decarbonise Britain's lorries are decades behind passenger cars. New analysis shows that there isn't a single dedicated electric charging or hydrogen refuelling site for heavy goods vehicles on Britain's major road network. The Society of Motor Manufacturers and Traders says the lack of infrastructure is putting a saving of up to 21 million tonnes of carbon a year at risk. Well, Mike Hawes, the chief executive of that organisation, joins me now from Birmingham. Mike, thank you so much for talking to us today. What needs to happen for this sector to switch to greener technologies?
Well, from a manufacturer's perspective, they're developing these new vehicles, electric vehicles, hydrogen vehicles, other technologies, and they're there on the market available now. But it's all very well put them on the market. You have to have customers. And for the customer, they have to have the confidence to make that switch. And the biggest obstacle that they all cite is the paucity of infrastructure. If they're to buy these vehicles, they'll be running up and down the road, motorways. Where will I be able to charge? Is that there? Is it accessible, especially to heavy goods vehicles? The answer at the moment, unfortunately, is no.
Well, Mike, why can't the HGV drivers just use the points that are there for passenger cars?
Well, I think we consider what is there for passengers. It's getting better, but there are still frustrations for EV drivers. You've seen the headlines, especially over bank holiday weekends, massive queues and so forth. But the fact is that infrastructure is designed for passenger cars, much smaller vehicle, much smaller footprint on the road. And for many of these sites, you wouldn't physically be able to get in a big 44-ton tractor with a trailer behind. And they also need much higher kilowatt power, much stronger, faster charge, because they have much bigger batteries. So they're just unsuitable. What you need is a dedicated system of infrastructure, one for passenger cars, one for commercial vehicles, and especially for the heavy goods vehicles.
What sort of range do they have, Mike?
It varies. At the moment, some of the vehicles are around 200 to 300 miles. Some are going up to 400 or 500 miles, and that's going to increase. Clearly, it is about developing the technology, making that technology more affordable to increase the range. That's on electrification. Also, when you think about hydrogen, that gives you much greater range, potentially up to 500, 600, 700 miles. And you need that balance because it's not a uniform industry, the heavy goods vehicle. Yes, you have freight, but you also have refuse collection. You also have refrigeration units. It makes a huge variety. So a multiplicity of technologies is the most likely needed for all those different solutions.
OK, Mike, thank you so much for talking to us.
My pleasure.
Right, finally, a man in India has been reintroducing mangrove trees along the shores of Vipin in the southern state of Kerala to combat rising sea levels. He's known as Mangrove Man. He's a retired fisherman and says he's seen the impact of rising sea levels firsthand, with families in his neighbourhood forced to relocate to higher ground. Tidal flooding is a growing problem in the area. Tipi Murugesan says the trees can help mitigate that impact.
Mangroves are an important species capable of creating a unique ecosystem. That's why I'm engaged in this effort to plant and protect mangroves. I'll continue with this mission until the day that I die.
Right, that's all from us today, but I'll be back at the same time tomorrow. I'll see you then.